You are listening to the Innovating Cannabis Podcast, where you will meet entrepreneurs, cultivators, scientists, doctors, and inventors in the cannabis industry.
I'm your host, Pam Schmiel. In addition to producing and hosting this show, I'm a freelance writer and editor for the Cannabis Industry Journal. Today, our guest is Jason Adelstone, an attorney with Harris Slowoski. He joins the podcast to break down the legal chaos affecting the cannabis and hemp industries. We dive into a new potential hemp loophole, the latest on 280E, Thailand's reversal of its cannabis laws, the pros and cons of pursuing a DEA license for future international trade, and the rise in product recalls, along with who ultimately bears the liability. Let's welcome Jason Adelstone to the show.
I thought we would just launch into the biggest topic, which is the hemp topic right now. And then, and maybe we can just start with what you had pointed out in your recent article. Maybe we'll start with that. And just, what do you make of it? Can states ignore it? All those questions that everybody's asking.
It kind of, especially because it came out of nowhere. I was definitely one of those people who said that hemp was probably like nothing was going to happen to hemp for a while, but also didn't plan on a 40 plus day shutdown that kind of led to a must pass bill that McConnell was going to be able to kind of gather all of the support that he's garnered over the decades to pass this. So along with everybody else, it was definitely a surprise. It does have some interesting language. There are some unintended consequences that are going to occur from this that if you read the language, it doesn't sound like it. For example, CBD isolate, kind of just straight CBD products that have no intoxicating effect. While the language sounds like, oh yeah, those will be permitted as long as they are naturally derived, there is certainly a concern because when you do kind of pull the CBD out, you can have some hot hemp and the THC content spikes up. So that immediately makes it illegal, which is obviously going to cut down on the amount of products that are available on people that are willing to participate in this industry and will thus have a very cooling effect on CBD products that have no intoxicating effect. So the reality of what the bill language the intent of the bill versus the reality, there's definitely a disconnect. And that also occurs in the blog post that I recently just wrote about some genetic material that wasn't included. The current language explicitly kind of excludes seeds that are derived from marijuana plants, excludes it from the definition of hemp. So up until, I guess now it'll be November 12th or 13th of 2026, seeds from a marijuana plant that up until then were considered hemp because they'll test below 0.3% are now going to still be included in the definition of marijuana. I have had some conversations with other attorneys in this space, and they see a difference in the language of derived from a marijuana plant versus grows into a marijuana plant. And I honestly think that's a distinction without a difference. You can't have seeds, at least I'm not a scientist, but I have spoken to a few over the last week or so, and you're not going to have 25% THC plant or a seed that grows into a 25% THC plant come from a 0.3% hemp plant. Like that's just not what's going to happen, especially when you're including the THCA now, which is what the federal government did in their new definition. So even though the definition says that it can't come from a marijuana plant, I don't think that's going to matter. I mean, it's going to be impossible for DEA to enforce that particular rule because you just have seeds all over the place. So finding the source plant is going to matter. So what I think you're going to see is if you even see any enforcement on this, because again, it's going to be very difficult and very costly. They will take a seed, grow the seed, and then as soon as the seed exceeds the 0.3%, then they can say that you were trafficking in marijuana and not hemp. But again, that's just like I'm guessing if they enforce this, it'll only be egregious violators. And it will only really apply to someone, a prosecutor that's just really like, I hate hemp. I want to go after these seed people. So the enforcement, I'm sure, is going to be very spotty if there's any at all on that. There's also something that didn't get added into the bill that this is what I wrote about to get back to that, is tissue cultures and clones that test at or below 0.3%. They are still within the definition of hemp. And I think the most important thing about this is Congress passed this bill specifically to close loopholes that they wanted to close. The fact that they didn't include tissue cultures and clones at or below 0.3% THC, which are traded on the market widely right now, the fact that they did not include that, I think, provides a greater legal argument that Congress intended to keep that legal. And so where it kind of lived in not so much a gray area, but kind of a gray area since 2018, I think there's a greater argument that Congress just intended to make that legal. So now tissue cultures that will grow into marijuana and clones that will grow into marijuana, I do think both of those now have more of a legal avenue than they possibly did a week ago.
So that just means that you can ship it across state lines,
And
like,
internationally.
and internationally.
Yeah, as long as you're complying with USDA, phytosanitary, and the importing country, their laws when it comes to um, plant material, then it's just like any other plant.
So you're saying that basically they now opened it up for marijuana to be to cross state lines and international lines, as opposed to it was not allowed before.
No, it already was under the 2018 Farm Bill. The definition of hemp made all of that legal because
Oh,
even though it's going to grow into marijuana, the actual substance at the time is 0.3% or less. I mean, all seeds are going to be that, tissue cultures, and then clones can because you're shipping those before they grow into the plant. So that's where you can get
oh,
some dangers. But that was always included. Just there's a kind of a legal argument that Rod Kite kind of established called the source rule. And Shane Pennington and Matt Zorn and Rod Kite kind of argued about whether the source rule exists. And basically, what this did for the seeds was it kind of brought back the source rule. So the source of the seeds is what determines whether the seeds are legal, not what the seed tests at now, which is what it used to be. What I'm saying is, so in the closing of this loophole, they closed the seed loophole, but they
they
completely ignored the tissue cultures and genetic or tissue cultures and clone loophole that exists now. And so moving forward beyond next November, anyone who gets busted for that, I think, has an even stronger legal argument that Congress intended to leave that loophole open since they spent all this time closing what they wanted to and they left that out of it.
right. I mean, that seems pretty significant.
I think so. I mean, I deal with a lot of people interested in shipping genetics domestically and internationally. And when I first read the document, saw the seeds, I was like, oh, that loophole's closed. But as I kept reading and didn't see anything about the two other options that people do, and tissue cultures are far more popular than seeds when you're trying to maintain quality for, say, medical programs. When you're shipping to a medical program overseas, a tissue culture, you'll be able to control the quality better than a seed. The seed, you don't exactly know what it's going to grow into. You can also kind of remove some stuff that's in the seed that you may not want through a tissue culture. So I think this is a very significant part of the loophole that wasn't closed. And also, I mean, the law allows FDA to implement regulations when it comes to certain cannabinoids, as well as the container definition. But nothing is said about USDA making rules that could include all of this. So there really is no statutory authority. It could possibly, maybe the fact that I wrote about this, or maybe other people are talking about this, may lead to a discussion when they go through the renewing the Farm Bill language. But as of right now, there's no they did not close that loophole, at least it appears that way.
Okay, so that means that seed breeders, genetic people can kind of maybe continue on for a little bit longer until that gets figured out. What about like the beverage edibles, how's that going to work? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, those are done as of the current language. I mean, any beverage, consumable, cosmetic, I mean, they were already illegal under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. So anyone who said that all these products were federally legal, that just wasn't true. These have always been illegal under federal law since 2018 because they violate the Food, Drug, Cosmetic Act. With the discussion that's going on right now in the industry is trying to get kind of to claw back some of the prohibitions through um, the Farm Bill language or other standalone bills. Personally, I don't see that happening. There may be some things that are clawed back, maybe the CBD that I discussed earlier, like maybe they'll figure out some language to allow just like pure CBD to be manufactured without, and maybe allow that spike to occur in small amounts or something. But as far as beverages, products, I don't see how you're going to get 60 votes in the Senate to legalize intoxicating hemp products, but not marijuana products.
Right, right.
And because of that, I think there is a possibility that beverages, just in general, you just basically marijuana and hemp beverages get regulated as cannabis beverages. And potentially that has an avenue because you have the liquor distributors are for that because pretty much everyone who talks about this is talking about the three-tier system. And so they're going to support that. So, and you have much broader acceptance on beverages. But if you're not going to legalize the adult use industry, I just don't see how you're going to get 60 votes in the Senate because you're not going to get all Democrats either because you're going to proponents of marijuana legalization aren't going to vote for that. Just it doesn't make sense.
Right. There's not enough, yeah, momentum going on the other side, really. But so,
There's actually a couple other things I wanted to bring up about just exclusions on the Farm Bill and also that kind of go along with this product question. So what's interesting is the bill technically it's like the first bill to legalize a milligram dosage for cannabis products. Like it's a zero point 0.4 milligram within a container. Container's defined, and then FDA is going to add further language to that. But what's really interesting about that is, I mean, we've seen through the Farm Bill language that the cannabis industry is incredibly innovative. So, I mean, they figure out ways. I mean, the whole intoxicating hemp industry was sprouted from innovation. No one was really thinking about that, despite some articles coming out recently saying otherwise. I don't believe Mitch McConnell thought this was going to be an intoxicating industry.
oh, right,
Um,
right. No, I don't think
and
so.
so, but what's interesting about the point four is the way it's defined is you can have, and I was talking to Shane Pennington about this earlier, about these next two things. You can have 10 containers within a packet that you just like open up and put into a water or something, and you could have a soluble hemp product that after you open those 10 packets, now you have a 4 milligram beverage. And obviously you double that. I mean, the packaging would be kind of crazy, but
Yeah,
I'm sure that you're going to be able to get innovation where the packages are super tiny, and now you could potentially have 4, 8, whatever milligram dose beverage that you're creating from pouring these
single
powders into, yeah.
single
So
serving size. Yeah.
I mean, that's an interesting loophole. There's also one that, and Shane brought this up earlier today, the stalks of the cannabis plant. So you now have this weird, you have the definition, marijuana is the most confusing definition now. What is marijuana? What is hemp? Because you have the marijuana definition, you have the exclusions, which include hemp, which have their own exclusions, which are subject to FDA regulations. So the definitions go everywhere. But in the original marijuana definition, it excludes stalks of the cannabis plant. And Shane wrote a blog post about this on his Substack, I think about 2 years ago, that talked about how like we're not scientists. Like I don't know if it's possible to create high THC within only stocks. So you're somehow growing stocks without anything else that's illegal. And in his Substack, he mentions that a scientist he talked to said it's technically possible. So I'm sure right now you have a lot of companies that are possibly looking into that because if you grow stocks of a cannabis plant that have, say, 25% THC in the stalks, that is not controlled under the CSA at all. That's
Mm.
not marijuana and it's not hemp, so you don't have to worry about it falling into either. The THC content could, I mean, it's the synthetic versions are scheduled, but the actual substance from the stocks technically wouldn't be, but there's possibly an argument there.
Only because they put it into law, the trichomes, or is that kind of why it's not, they didn't specify the stocks?
No, so the stocks are when you have the definition of marijuana, it has like the seeds, derivatives, all of that, except for hemp as defined and the stalks of the marijuana plant. And let me see if I can pull up the exact language.
That's so
Um,
interesting because I mean, recently there was a science research team out of South Africa who discovered that all these new cannabinoids that we didn't even know about, have never even heard about, are in the leaves, like that leaf that we all know, which was usually just thrown away. So who knows
yeah.
what's in there?
Yeah, and that's so the leaves are really interesting, not in the US because they are still kind of captured by our definition of marijuana and now the exclusion from hemp. But when the single convention came out and all the countries were signing on to it and they were having the discussions about what was going to go into that, the single convention excluded the leaves of the marijuana plant because they figured there was nothing in it. I mean, there were some like cigarettes that were being made from the leaves of the cannabis plant, and the convention commentary does talk about needing to protect against that. And if you notice, there's diversion, but they didn't know anything about it. So that's why in India right now, for example, you have some provinces that are expanding their cannabis programs because the leaves are just they're allowed because India really applies a lot of what the convention says, and since it's excluded, the leaves have just been around for centuries in India. And so you have a robust market of leaves that are not controlled, and that's likely the same thing. It's probably a reason why a lot of countries study the leaves or are implementing programs that incorporate it. Unfortunately, the US, though, was just like, I mean, we basically are the ones who pushed cannabis into the single convention. And so we basically said like anything from the plant and then slowly have excluded. And then this is the first time in decades that we've really just thrown more into the prohibitionist framework of our CSA.
Wow. So, what do you how do you think the industry should mobilize now moving forward? I mean, I kind of feel like if I was a company that, had a fight in this game, that I wouldn't spend my money on legal issues right now because I feel like we're right on the cusp of deschedule or rescheduling. I know I hate to say that it's been going on for so long, but it just feels like, I feel like it's the plan, it's in the plan, but of course we can't depend on that. So moving forward, how do you think that these big companies who have really big stakes, like these CBD companies, farmers?
Yeah, I mean, so I think you brought up two things there. One, rescheduling isn't really going to affect. I mean, so now that this is getting put, a lot of these things are getting put back in the definition of marijuana. Without rescheduling, all these hemp operators will be subject to 280E because it will be considered all of these hemp products, all of the farming, like everything's going to be considered marijuana now. So they will be subject to 280E. So Schedule 3 is important to ensure that all of these companies, both in the hemp and marijuana space, don't become subject to that, or at least for hemp, don't become subject to that, and for marijuana, remove that burden on them. And that's really the only thing that Schedule 3 is going to do for hemp and marijuana operators in the state legal market. For DEA registrants, it possibly opens up international trade under the medical prong of the two treaties, like medical and scientific. But as far as state operators, hemp operators, Schedule 3 really isn't going to do much except for the tax issue, which is a big deal. But aside from operations, and what they can actually do, what they can transport across state lines, that's not going to change. So if you have Schedule 3 with no change to the current bill as it exists, these hemp operators still won't be able to participate in a interstate market. It'll all have to be intrastate, like state legal marijuana is basically what's going to happen. Because of that, though, and this has been for a while, the industry, I mean, it's kind of understandable. You have the marijuana industry who's been overly regulated, overly taxed, was facing basically the same industry that didn't have any of that. I mean, I talked to some restaurant owners. I'm on the local chapter of the Colorado Restaurant Association, and I was talking to some operators, and I said it's basically like you're a restaurant. You're regulated, you're taxed. I mean, they're incredibly burdened in Colorado where I am and pretty much around the
Um,
country. But it would be like if a restaurant opened up next to you that was called something else. It was called, let's just say bar for just example. It's a bar, but they can serve food and they weren't regulated at all. They weren't taxed at all. And you're next to them, you're following all the rules, you're doing everything. It's going to be hard for you to work with that restaurant to try to bring them in and get them accepted. And that's kind of what's going on with this. I mean, the products that were being sold were basically the exact same products you get in a dispensary here in Colorado. Um, and so the marijuana industry was adamant on trying to get hemp controlled, trying to add regulations federally, just trying to get them into an equal framework as the marijuana operators. And obviously the hemp operators didn't want that because it's ridiculous burdens. And so it created this real, just, it was very contested. It was, I mean, the industries were not working together. They were diametrically opposed. And so now that both of them are federally prohibited, I'm hoping that it will bring on kind of a collective of both marijuana and hemp operators to come together and find a framework that applies pretty much just to one plant. Like it's insane that we have this bifurcation of hemp and marijuana. And now, I mean, the definition is just ridiculous. And so by moving forward in one direction as a one plant regulation and regulatory structure, I think that is what I hope the industry does. If they don't do that, I think we could very easily see a crackdown on state legal operators as well, because I mean, anytime you have fighting, anyone who's against it can drive a wedge and create even more friction. And with an administration who honestly we don't know, I mean, there's tons of people in the Trump administration who are adamant prohibitionists, very much against marijuana, but there's also a lot in his administration that are very much for it. And when you have this infighting and you have this constant kind of butting heads of hemp and marijuana, it allows those prohibitionists to come in and kind of drive the conversation, which could potentially lead to an enforcement on state legal operators. I mean, that's not out of the realm of possibilities with this administration. We're anywhere,
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, that's what's wild about this administration and kind of, especially on the cannabis front, where you have two equally powerful parts of his coalition that are for and against it. We could have a complete prohibition where they crack down on state legal markets. You start seeing DEA raid state regulated facilities, or you could see the States Act passed in Congress and
Yeah.
signed by the president, and we have full legalization. I mean, it's the gamut of what can happen under this administration is just
I know
crazy.
I know. And then Nancy Mace just introduced a bill, I guess, to another tactic to try
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
so that's to claw back some of the hemp prohibitions. Nancy Mace used to be one of the leading voices on cannabis liberalization in Congress, and she was a great voice for that. Over the last few years, she's lost a lot of her standing and credibility in Congress, from what I've heard. And so I don't know. That one, again, I don't see that the hemp industry is going to get products like taken. I don't see
Yeah,
Congress
yeah,
taking
like
it
you
back
said.
out without
Right,
doing marijuana, and I don't see that happening. So
right,
the
right, right.
States Act is certain. If anything is going to pass, again, I think it may be something specific to like CBD only type products or isolate or something like that, having nothing to do with THC, except for keeping that prohibited. But if we see any movement other than that, the only thing I can see that makes sense is the States Act, because it's, I think, a 5-page act. There's no real regulation. There's somewhat of a framework, but it basically just leaves it to the states. So it's palatable for many Republicans. And while Democrats want to have social equity included in everything, a bill with social equity provisions is never going to pass 60 votes in the Senate. And so hopefully some Democrats would see that and sign on as well, at least enough to get through the 60 vote threshold. So yeah, I think that's pretty much the only way we get legalization of these products again is through actual legalization or just the CBD and maybe beverage lane.
And doesn't that also open it up to interstate commerce? The
Yeah, as soon as you legalize it federally, that
they can
opens up
decide.
interstate commerce. Yeah.
Okay, the
Because it's
states 2.0 can decide if each state can decide if they want to participate in. Okay, all right.
yeah, yeah.
And
And I mean it's kind of the same as what happened with hemp in 2018 where a state can opt in, they don't have to, but they can't prohibit the transport through their state. So as long as you're just driving through Idaho and not stopping in Idaho, you should be okay. Although Idaho still arrested some hemp farmers who were driving through, but um
God,
yeah, Idaho is
I
the
know
most
that's probably the
restrictive
worst.
state.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a pretty that you know we're not even talking about that state.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, it's not even on anybody's radar. So
no.
is states 2.0, do you think that's even viable? Like, do you think it's a possibility? Is it just I haven't really heard any movement on it. Where's it sitting?
It's still in the house.
Oh,
Yeah, I think last I saw it has a few dozen co-signers, but I mean the only way that that goes through is if President Trump wants it to, if he becomes vocal about it, which I think is a tall order. Especially I don't know how that squares with what's going on with bombing boats in the Caribbean. So I don't see how that, I mean this administration is somehow able to square things that would never square with anyone else, so I don't want to put it past them. But that would be a very difficult thing, I think, for them to sell is let's legalize marijuana while we continue to bomb boats. So I don't
yeah.
I'm not holding too many hopes on that one, but I think that's the only way it happens is if President Trump comes out and as it says, I want Congress to pass states 2.0 and I want it on my desk next
But
week.
also, I feel like I almost feel like that's two different things because the international is just trying to stop drug trafficking. You know, maybe it's like you're saying, it's the crackdown on that. But I mean, if that was happening inside the United States, that's the only thing and just in my mind, but you're a lawyer, so you see it differently.
I guess, yeah, I mean, that's international, but the argument is that the drugs are coming to the US. Like, I think it's fentanyl. I don't know the exact rationale. I haven't read that, but I think I mean, I know part of it is that they're saying that these are drugs that are coming to the US, by cartels that we're designating as terrorists. And because of that, we're able to do this because we're protecting drugs being imported into our country. And so I think that's just, yeah, the actual act is international. It's different, but it's just showing an extreme enforcement. I mean, that's an enforcement that's even outside of our laws. We don't have death penalty for just drug use and trafficking.
Yeah,
So
that's pretty.
I just find that is going to be a difficult sell, especially for Congress people who are saying that who are not really pushing back on these bombings. So I mean, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
certainly possible. I mean, it's a winning um legalization is a winning concept and action for, say, the midterms or 2028. It's a very popular thing. I mean, Republican support has dwindled over the last couple years, but when you ask, like, if we should have a medical program, that support, I believe, is in the 70s to 80%. When you add adult use, that lowers a bit to, I think it's hit 40% for Republicans, which is the lowest it's been in a really long time. But I don't think it's an issue that's going to lose too many people. I think it will only gain popularity if it happened. So it may be something that they look at next year, closer to the midterms, or if some issue that they really want to distract from comes up, that's certainly, I think, a worthwhile um, concept to bring up is legalizing cannabis, because that's going to create a ton of conversations and could easily distract from something that they're trying to distract from. Um, so I mean, yeah, that's just another reason why it's possible, or it's possible they crack down on state legal operators. So, I mean, you never know.
Oh my God. Okay. So on to 280E. So we know that'll go away after rescheduling. One question is what happens to those who choose not to pay? I mean, do you think it'll be like if it goes to rescheduling, are they responsible for retroactive? Is that something? And then I just want to throw out there, I heard somebody discussing another little loophole, which is a little workaround. So the IRS has authority to determine if cannabis falls within Schedule 1, which was determined by the DEA, and decide if 280E applies or not.
Yeah, so to that point, there is an argument going around with some CPAs, and I've helped write some 280E opinions on the legal side. And that argument, the language of 280E says within the meaning of Schedule 1. So you can't take a deduction if you're working with substances within the meaning of Schedule 1. And so what the argument is once HHS issued its recommendation to move it to Schedule 3 and DEA issued their proposed rule, that it was no longer within the meaning of Schedule 1, that recommendation and the subsequent rule or proposed rule brought it outside of the meaning of Schedule 1. And while that I think is a bit of a reach, in order to not pay certain taxes, because you're claiming that you're not subject to paying that tax, there's certain levels, and I don't know exactly what all the levels are, but the lowest one is reasonable basis. You have to have like a reasonable basis, which I think is just more likely than not kind of standard. But again, don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Definitely talk to your CPA if you're going to use any of this. But and so as long as you have like a reasonable basis for arguing that you shouldn't pay, then it's not going to keep you from having to pay, because I don't think that any of these arguments are actually going to ultimately win. But IRS, like we saw with Trulieve, may actually refund some of what you've paid before, and eventually they'll call that back. They'll say you need to pay this. But when you pay it, your fines are going to be less because you have a reasonable basis. And you want to the penalties that you would without that. So that's kind of the strategy going on right now, is a lot of companies are just they think they can make more money on what they would have paid by putting it into something else rather than paying it. And so they make interest off of that, and they think that the penalties that will come later are going to be less than what they're making on it now. It's not, and I've heard this from a few companies, it's not that these companies are being told you're never going to have to pay this. They're just it's kind of on hold right now. And so to get to your first question, if let's say it happens January 1st, that's just an easy day to work with. IRS would have to issue some sort of opinion or policy that it would be retroactive. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think there's a chance that DEA says that everything that you paid before is no longer, like, you don't have to pay it if you haven't already, and if you have paid it, we're going to give it to you back. I don't see any chance that it's retroactive. So it would be if let's say DEA moves to Schedule 3 on December 31st, they just say, all right, here's the final order. They scrap the hearing that was going on, which a lot of people think is going to happen if they go to Schedule 3, but they scrap the hearing, and DEA just says we're on Schedule 3 starting 30 days from today. So let's say I guess, December 1st. 30 days from today, we're on Schedule 3. Then this whole year will be 280E will apply. Starting January 1st, 280E would not apply. And so that is obviously a huge gain for companies next year. But I really, I don't, it wouldn't make sense. I don't know why the IRS would make it retroactive.
I know. Why would they? Why would they?
Yeah,
Yeah,
they get more from it. So
I
I
know.
don't, it would also be, I mean, they're already, the administration cut so many positions at IRS that they're really understaffed, and that would require a substantial amount of work. So I just like everything that that would require, it just makes me think that there's no way it would be retroactive. And to go, I guess specifically to your question of what if someone just doesn't pay, then they just get like if they just don't pay and they don't even have a reasonable basis, they're going to get some major penalties.
Really, I mean, we have, the U.S. government has cannabinoid IPs,
Yeah.
intellectual property. I mean, that is so
Yeah, but
contradicting.
the language of 280E is specific to its placement within the Controlled Substances Act, not its treatment. I mean, that's the argument with the within the meaning of, and that's what people are saying. But it's very specific that Schedule 1 and 2 substances are you cannot make standard deductions that other businesses can, and it's specific to the scheduling, not to everything else. I mean, that argument about the cannabis patents, like that's just another reason why the whole legal or making it illegal is just wild because
I know, it's wild.
yeah,
Yeah,
and it's safer than alcohol. So
I
that, I
know.
mean, the everything about that, it just it's the most frustrating argument. I mean, like I said, I'm on the local chapter of the Colorado Restaurant Association, and talking to people about trying to get Colorado this next legislative session is going to try. They were going to try to do hemp beverages. Now I don't know what the updated language is going to be, but they're still going to try to move forward to try to allow for restaurants, bars, stores to sell hemp beverages, and they already can at a 1.75 milligram level, but they want to increase that to 5 or 10. And so I've been having discussions with restaurants, and they're all mainly insurance companies are the ones that are like, we're never going to do this. And I'm like, okay, I understand that, but what if the restaurant only does cannabis? They don't do alcohol. That's likely going to be safer for you. You're going to likely have fewer issues if you have a restaurant that only sells hemp or cannabis beverages and not alcohol. And a few of them have been like, you know what, you're probably right. That's something to think about. So, yeah, I mean, the whole concept, like cannabis's illegality, just all of it is just crazy, and Congress just made it even more crazy and confusing.
I know. Oh my God. So, how about onto the international scene? I know that you recently were in Thailand and attended the International Asian Hemp Expo. Just wanted to get your takeaways on that. What's happening in Thailand? How strict are they now? Is it reversing?
So, yeah, I mean, I've been following Thailand for a while. I've written about it for a while, so it was really great to actually be on the ground, get some tours of facilities and really great operators, and see what's actually happening with the medical only framework that the Ministry of Health put out. I think it was in June, may have been July, but they basically just issued an order. And kind of like an executive action, once the order in Thailand is published in their official gazette, it becomes law. And a future a future Ministry of Health can rescind it. But until that happens, it's law. And so right now, Thailand's in an official position where they only have medical marijuana, that the entire supply chain is medical. Having been there, that is certainly not being enforced on a 100% scale. They did immediately shut down a lot of operators who were just very bad operators. But after that initial wave of enforcement actions, they haven't really seen as much now. And so when I was there, I did both. Actual tourists can go and they can get prescriptions to get medical marijuana. And so that to me is a framework that makes sense because I mean Thailand was it was incredible that they were able to remove the cannabis plant from scheduling. The Ministry of Health at the time, who's now the Prime Minister, um, he was able to do that because of some authorities he was given during the COVID pandemic. And so that completely made Thailand a unique unicorn within Asia, because I mean they're historically extremely strict. Cannabis had a long history in Thailand and most Asian nations, and so initially it was like, yeah, let's do this. But when you remove it from scheduling without regulation, this happened 3 years ago. Yeah, 3 years ago. They still have not been able to officially regulate the system. And so when you have descheduling and decriminalization without regulation, you get this Wild West that's basically everything prohibitionists argue is wrong with cannabis legalization and why it shouldn't comes true under decriminalization without regulation because you have people selling. I mean, you
No
can go to,
rules.
yeah, no rules. You can go to gas stations and get it. They're attractive. The packaging can be attractive to minors. There's just no real rules in there. So what I talk to a lot of people about is a lot of questions I was asked is where do you see the Thai market in influencing the rest of Asia? And I think if they can get regulations passed, then they will certainly be able to influence the rest of Asia. Because, I mean, in every country who's regulated or state in the US, it has reduced the black market. It's never going to eliminate it. So that goal should never even be that should just never be the goal. That's not possible. And it helps ensure that products are safe, they're tested, you're not having heavy metals in them, you're not having mold, products aren't attractive to minors, you have 21 or 18 or whatever the age is that they decide. So you have so many protections, and I think that would lead to other Asian nations potentially moving forward with some form. I mean, I think it'll be a while. But as it currently stands, the medical part, like they are moving forward on a medical track in Thailand to allow manufacturers and cultivators to export, which is great. That is their GMP requirements,
I was just
GACP requirements, Thai FDA. I mean, there's all these requirements, and there are some. We visited a few really great operators that are already exporting to Australia is a big one. And so that I see really growing the adult use market that currently exists, because I mean, like I said, I got a prescription to go into one, but I also went into one without it and bought as well. And so that is still very prevalent and everywhere. And as long as they can, as long as they can regulate and control that market to keep illicit traffic at bay and keep minors from accessing, then I think Thailand has a really strong future as just a great kind of tourist destination for those wanting to enjoy cannabis in a incredibly gorgeous country.
Wow, I know I've never been. I've wanted to go. But I've also heard like before they reversed everything that and I guess it was still the same health he was the health minister at the time, is that they really wanted to support the local farmers. So the facilities that you went to see, were they local farmers or were they people out, foreigners who came?
It's both. I would say there's a heavy presence of cultivation knowledge coming from the US. A lot of US operators moved there to start up cultivations and manufacturing, but at least the one we visited that was a cultivation center. They hire all Thai employees. They pay them far above the average wage. And they've really kind of helped these families. Like some of them, and they were explaining, were able to buy a car for the first time. And so they are incorporating Thai operators into their system. I can't say that that's what's happening everywhere. But
Yeah.
I do know that if you're it definitely is a country where you need to have good relationships with the regulators, especially those in the FDA. And if you're just coming in saying that I'm a US operator, I'm bringing all of my people, we're not going to have any of yours, that's likely going to be a difficult sell, and you're going to have a much harder time embedding yourself into their program and their society. I mean, um, it also just financially wouldn't make sense because even paying Thai employees an incredible wage in comparison to what else they'd be doing, it's still going to be far less than what you'd be paying US personnel to come over and do it. So, um,
Yeah. I think it's great. I mean, I think that's the whole global, I think, community. We should all share our knowledge and lift each other up, all boats rising. And it's the same in the United States with the West Coast, like Colorado, California, Oregon, all those places coming to the East Coast, on the East Coast. So you really see that coming. But it's really good because we need to have that knowledge. So
Yeah.
hope that it's
And
working that way.
one of the largest facilities, I didn't get a chance to visit in enough time, but one of the largest facilities that everyone said was just amazing, is owned by, I think, one of the largest companies in Thailand. So that one is Thai owned. They have brought in people, but I met with several of their executives who were Thai. So there's definitely a lot of both. And yeah, you need to it needs to be both. Like we West Coast genetics are like that's what everyone wants outside. I mean, the like Snoop Dogg genetics, like Death Row Records, like those names are still out there. You still see shirts people wearing. So people want that kind of nostalgic um, type of genetics, but they want it incorporated into a system that's theirs. And so while, yeah, US operators can provide a lot of knowledge and assistance and genetics, the Thai program should be Thai.
And so you're allowed as a tourist to consume there, buy and consume. But they don't consume on the street, right? You have to do it privately. How does
It's kind of the same here with smoking on the streets. Like you're not gonna really get busted unless you're doing it,
in their
unless it's a
face?
problem, you're doing it around kids, like things
Oh,
like that. I mean, it wasn't something I did. It wasn't really even something I saw, but it is prohibited like it is here. They
okay.
do have kind of consumption lounges. I know one of the I was at, they have a market on Saturdays and Sundays. Is this gigantic market that has just like everything you could think of. I went there with a friend of mine and we just ordered a pre-roll and went into their consumption room, which was right in the back, and then we consumed there and walked out and finished
Uh,
our day.
okay.
And at that time I did have a prescription. Um, and which is that was an interesting experience to go through getting that. But I think I've Thailand should, I mean, it's such a great place and it should be a place where people can consume. I mean, really anywhere should. And so even if they go to a medical framework, which I don't think is a problem, I think that's a smart way to move forward, but allow tourists to get prescriptions like you can now. Like I'm hoping that if they do pass regulations, they don't prevent that because that's
Yeah,
you're only
that's a
going to have an increase in the black market if you have limited access. And so and it also provides an increased revenue stream
I
for
was
all
gonna say,
these places.
yeah, definitely. You would not want to, I mean, the tourists are huge and they all want to try Thai weed. So it's,
I mean, there
that's
is the tourism department within their government has written quite a few pieces over the last couple years about the problems that are like there are a lot of people who obviously don't want to smell cannabis who are bringing their kids and don't want them to go through a plume of smoke. So, but having places for tourists to go, having the ability for them to access it will help prevent all of that. Because if you have places that someone can consume safely, they're going to go there, especially if you're on vacation. I mean, even if it's a few extra dollars, like that's just part of what you'd be planning.
Mhm.
And whereas right now, if it's all on the black market and you still want to get it, then you're going to have to like go smoke on the street that a kid could walk through or go into an alley that could be dangerous. Like yeah, so I mean, it's an interesting Thailand is a very interesting experiment going on right now that I'm hoping, I mean, they have elections, so I'm gonna use his first name. No disrespect, it's just I will butcher his last
I
name.
know.
But a Newton is the prime minister right now. He was the health minister. He's the prime minister now, a brilliant politician. Like the fact his party was losing popularity under the last election, a lot of it had to do with cannabis and some other stuff. Um, when the Cambodian issue happened on the border and the prior prime minister had her issues and got removed, he somehow worked his way into becoming the prime minister, agreeing to dissolve parliament and hold elections in January. And from what I'm hearing, his popularity since then has just skyrocketed. So there's a really good chance that his party could win. And he's not like he is pro cannabis. Obviously, he removed it, but he was kind of coined the king of cannabis, and he does not like that because he personally does not like cannabis, from what I've been told by the Thai people I was speaking to at the conference. And so it's not entirely sure how much he will, if they win again, how much he will try to influence regulations or care. But hopefully they will move forward with regulations after January. But that'll be a big tell, and the results of the elections will also.
Hopefully he has good economic smarts because between the tourists and the trade export, I mean that, it's a poor country. They could just really boost, their economics. So I hope that happens there. So
Yeah, and I mean, I have never met him. I've never been in conversations where I've heard him, but I've read a lot about him, and he is an incredibly savvy politician who I think understands certain things that will help him out and help the Thai people out. And so I agree with you. I hope that they're able to look at this as both something they need to control, but allow as well.
right, right. So kind of winding down, I just have two quick questions. The You had mentioned in a previous conversation that you thought it would be smart of some cannabis companies to pursue getting a DEA license in preparation for international trade, and there's only a few out there. Is that easy to do? Is that something? How do you think about that? Do you think that's still a good idea?
DEA registrations are extremely difficult to obtain. There's only, I believe we're at 7 right now that are issued. We've had over the last few years, we've had, I think, up to 9 and as few as 6, just because there's no money in it right now. There's no money in research. So even the ones that are licensed and registered, not all of them are producing marijuana. So it's very difficult. But if I was one of the large MSOs, I think it's a good call to try to get a license now in preparation for whatever's to come. If depending on the price, it may be worth holding on to. I mean, I'm right now working on a pretty beastly either blog post, paper. I'm not entirely sure what this is going to be, but I think there's going to be greater opportunities in the future, especially if we have a president that's pro-cannabis, for these DEA registrants and potentially state operators to participate in a federal market without Congress doing anything. So the way our current administration and the Supreme Court have basically ruled and is that the president has pretty much, it seems, unfettered authority to direct agencies as the president deems necessary. It's the unitary executive concept. And because of that, if let's say the next president comes in, especially let's just say he's Democratic, 'cause that's most likely the most supportive on cannabis, um, comes in, they could basically legalize medical market almost immediately by registering a bunch of people, registering a bunch more applicants, all of those in line. There's dozens of applicants in line. By legalizing or just forcing the DEA to issue those, allowing interstate transport between DEA registrants, basically having FDA allow botanicals and physicians to prescribe such botanicals would basically create medical without Congress doing anything. So, in addition to the 7 licensees that a MSO could potentially get, it'd be difficult because right now DEA statutorily is only required to ask if the applicant's been convicted of a felony. I forget if it's drug specific, but right now they basically just say is have you violated state or federal law? And that's a question they ask on their supplemental questions. And if you answer yes to that, then you're pretty much going to be disregarded. And so right now it's difficult, but they could potentially get one of those licenses, or you can also possibly buy your way into the line because it's kind of a first come, first serve. So if you apply now, you're behind dozens and dozens of people. And at the current kind of policy and everything, you're never going to get a license. Like there's never going to be enough demand to justify licensing all those people. And so, but if I was an MSO, I would certainly be looking at current licensees or buying my way on that line to just, if the price is right, to prepare for the what ifs that could occur now, including what I just mentioned about the next president just kind of de facto regulating into legalization.
Yeah, right. Because it would make sense for some who, MSOs who participate or engage in any sort of like university partnerships or anything like that, now wanting to prove efficacy in certain things. That could be, yeah, it's something to explore for an MSO getting ready for international trade. Look, Cresco just went international. You
Yeah.
know, that they should have kind of thought this path that you're talking about. Anyway, so the last question is, I've been hearing more and more about product liability and wondering where it falls as far as recalls that are happening in dispensaries and some like I think there were a bunch in Colorado actually, and I think 710 Labs was one of the ones that caught my eye,
Mhm.
and they're arguing saying, hey, it left our warehouse in perfect condition, so somewhere preservation from there to your retail store degraded my product, ruined it, now it's moldy or it's whatever. And I also heard that somebody I guess, put a lawsuit against the Grove packaging, saying the same thing because it supposedly this packaging cures cannabis, to preserve it. So, just wondering what your have you heard anything about that and who you think might be liable for that kind of stuff?
I mean, I don't deal too much with product liability lawsuits or at all, really. So I'm just kind of pulling on my law school
Yeah.
and just what I read about. But the entire supply chain can be brought into product liability. So I mean, like the 710 Labs, like that, yeah, they're the ones who are getting called out for it, and they're the ones that are likely going to be responsible unless they can prove what they're alleging. So they're probably going to bear the burden to prove that the packaging or the delivery service or the dispensary or whatever is the cause of it, which is going to be extremely expensive. But I mean, that kind of goes to a larger question about the packaging requirements that states implement don't make a lot of sense, and they could create issues like that where, I mean, I know, so I operate in New Mexico as well. And New Mexico initially in their law required the packaging to be both compostable and recyclable. It was a mistake in the language that they didn't fix. I am actually not even sure they fixed it to date. They don't enforce that, but that's pretty much impossible. But also the requirement to having even recyclable products that are either made from recycled material or are recyclable. The majority of those products, at least a few years ago, could only come from China. And so while the goal was for environmental protection, they're not taking into account the transport from China. And that's the same, like you have policymakers that don't really understand everything about the policies that they're making. And so you end up with situations like that or like this, where possibly the containers in Colorado were problematic and the requirements led to some of the issues that 710 Labs incurred or allegedly incurred. So, I mean, I think, yeah, the entire supply chain is going to be on notice for a product recall, and then the assignment of liability is going to be an argument between those parties. So it's going to be a difficult one for and it may even cost them less to just settle than to even figure that out. So
Hmm. Right. It's just
yeah,
it's got to be I think it's going to come up more and more. I don't know. I'm kind of focused on that right now, and I've heard a few, and I'm doing a big article on like the lack of cold chain supply infrastructure from the last mile from warehouse to retail, how it's really lacking, and it should be along the lines of pharmaceutical. It should be the track and trace if anything falls under temperature or over temperature, that kind of stuff. So,
yeah.
um,
And I mean,
um,
I think this also highlights like, yeah, this is a issue that occurred in a regulated system, but it was caught and products were recalled and people didn't consume those. If we were living in an unregulated system here in Colorado, those products would still exist. I mean, they wouldn't be 710 Lab branded products, but the products would still exist. People would still be smoking those contaminated joints or whatever. And so this, again, regulation saves lives, even though you're
Oh,
gonna have problems. This worked exactly, at least from what I've read, this worked exactly how it should have. It was caught, removed, and now they're dealing with who's responsible.
right, right, right. That's it. That's a wrap.